Today's video is going to be about Syncthing. Syncthing is an open source, real-time and secure continuous synchronization app which will sync between multiple different devices. I just want to start off by showing today really what I'm using it for firstly, and it'll give you a better idea really of what possibly you can use it for. And then we'll take a look at the website, and as usual I'll tour through the interface a little bit and just show you sort of really what it does. But this is my setup at home at the moment, and I've got an Intel NUC over here, which is acting as an Open Media Vault server. It's running Syncthing actually in a Docker container with a web interface that you can use to manage it. And on my other devices, I have got Syncthing installed. So it's installed on my Linux computer. It's installed on my Android smartphone. It's also installed on my Samsung tablet as well as my iPad. And of course, you could have an iPhone or whatever other device you want as well. The point is, I've got Obsidian notes, which I use quite intensively on my desktop computer or my laptop, you could say. And I like to have copies of those notes. There's hundreds of notes I've got for all the different things that I've been, researching and learning and need to remember and reference and so on. So what happens is I've got my main repository on the desktop computer. It is backing up to a secondary drive and the cloud and a few other things, but that's not really part of what I want to show today. What I'm really doing is I'm syncing a copy of those notes across to the Intel NUC server or that Docker container. In your case, this could even just be in another desktop computer in the house or a media computer or whatever the case is. And each of my other devices is also connecting and syncing to that server for the Obsidian notes. Now, they could go directly to each other or connect between each other, but the idea is try and keep it simple. Draw a picture for yourself almost like this and just decide what exactly do you want to sync where. I only use Obsidian notes at any time on one device. I don't open it up on multiple devices at the same time. That can cause clashes or issues. And Syncthing will warn you about that. But, you want to try and avoid a situation like that. So, if I've finished on the desktop and I've shut down Obsidian Notes, I can then reference it on each of or any one of these other machines. And I can make changes and it'll sync back whenever I've got the desktop back on again. So those are two-way syncs. And I'm really using this machine in the middle as sort of, call it the common sync machine, because it's always on 24/7. These aren't all necessarily on apart from maybe the phone. So that is one scenario for notes. The other that I'm using at the moment is for my photos. If you take a lot of photos or sound recordings, recording of phone calls or meetings or whatever the case is, you are creating those records the whole time on your phone, or it could be your laptop, but it doesn't matter. Let's call it your phone in my case. What I now do is, the moment I'm back in the house again, it will synchronize to my desktop computer, the Syncthing on my desktop computer whenever it's on. I've got a two-way sync set, and the reason for that really is because what I do is I will listen to those recordings or the photos and move them to wherever I want them to. But the nice thing is I don't have to keep manually connecting the phone up via Wi-Fi or a cable and then, downloading photos and so on. I just find this incredibly slick. I can do all the work I want to on my desktop computer, and I can also clean up from there. So if I have copied those photos into the photo album, wherever I keep them, or the sound recordings, and I've deleted the ones I don't want, whatever I've moved out of or deleted in that folder on the desktop here will remove it then from the phone at the same time. So it automatically keeps my phone sort of clean as well when I've dealt with whatever I'm working with. I'm also testing one other thing out here. I didn't show it in this diagram, but I am taking my main Photos album for 2023 and I'm syncing it in one direction across to the server. There's a lot of space on this machine. There's about 4 terabytes or so on a mirrored drive there. So I'm just testing this out, and I'm keeping 2 backup copies if I make any changes as well. But in this case, it's not a two-way sync because I'm not really working on this machine like deleting photos or anything. But I'll show you when we get to touring the interface. I'll show you the different ways you can set up the sync, as well as some basic versioning control. So the versioning control, this is not really a backup app per se, but you'll see with the version controls, I'm using it on my notes at the moment, and you can really use it as a basic backup application as well. So for those of you that don't have things like, say, Nextcloud on a hosted server somewhere, or you don't have a ton of space on a server or anything else like that, Syncthing really does sort of fit the bill, really, because it's syncing directly between whatever devices you've got. As I said, whether it's a spare computer in the house that you're going to use as a server, you can even sync across the internet to friends if they give you their Syncthing ID. So it's, quite versatile. And I think on that note, let's just go and have a look at the website because it covers some concerns and around privacy and security as well. So if we look at the Syncthing website, and there the address is at the top, I will have the links also below the video for you. You'll see that sort of right top and center here, they're talking about the privacy and security. So first of all, your data is not going anywhere to Syncthing. It's only residing on those folders of the devices that you have set it up for. So, whether it's just between your phone, your desktop computer, or your phone and your tablet, you want to sync your photos or whatever the case is, it's not going through any Google or Dropbox or anything else. So total privacy, you control that. Everything is encrypted with TLS. So anything that moves off your LAN or across the internet is fully encrypted as well. Again, you are setting that encryption, and you can also set passwords for the actual folders themselves as well to encrypt. I'm not doing that because I'm doing it only on the LAN at the moment. But, if it was, for example, being synced maybe to an untrusted device, then you, like a friend's maybe machine or something, you could set encryption on that as well. There's authentication. You have to authenticate and accept everything that happens as well. It's not just a push and it's automatically received on the other side. It is an open protocol, so that's just reassurance in case, for example, Syncthing goes out of business or something happens, you've still got control over the application and the use of it. It is open source. You can look at the code on GitHub and you can contribute to it as well, or log issues or whatever. There's forums there. And then the other interesting part really was the ease of use here. So yes, the other thing is no limitations. So you can have as many folders as you need. So think a little bit about how you want to have your folders. I thought at first, do I do all my photo subdirectories in one go? And I thought, no, maybe I actually want to do them sort of year by year rather, separate folder by separate folder, because I can delete them or do whatever I want to do them individually. So think about how and what you want to sync. It's very portable. It works here, as it says, across Mac, Windows, Linux, FreeBSD, Solaris, OpenBSD, and then, of course, all the various mobile devices as well, Android and iOS. The other interesting thing here is actually it doesn't need physical IP addresses or advanced configuration. So this might be very useful for people that don't want to get into the technicalities of networking and worry about what's the IP address of the other machine on the network or whatever. It actually uses its own unique ID per device. So when you set up a device, it shares itself sort of on its, especially on the LAN, the local network is fantastic. If you say you want to share to another Syncthing machine, it's aware of the other machines that are running. You can just select them, and then on the other machine, you go and accept, that share. And that's sort of really it for the website. I think we can actually just go and have a look then maybe at the setup of one or two of the apps that I'm running. So this is my desktop. You'll see it's using my local host ID 127 over there. There is actually an app that's running, that's installed. This is on Manjaro Linux. So if I was to show you now, that is the Syncthing GTK app that I've got installed on Manjaro Linux. And you'll see there are my folders that I've got shared. And as far as my desktop computer is, these are the devices that it is seeing. You see, it's not seeing the tablets. It's seeing just the phone that it's sharing directly with and that OMV server that I'm sharing with. And obviously there's the status, lovely stats and everything. You can also right click and edit, the device and that sort of thing. But that side, I just want to show this to you because on the notes, I have got versions of my notes as well that I'm backing up, but you'll see there's no way really of getting to the version. So from what I've gathered is the more complete way to actually work with this really is to use the browser view of the application. So let me just close this application. This is the browser view. And again, you'll see there are my individual folders that I've got shared. it confirms again what is this device with its details and what are the two other remote devices that I'm connecting to. And you'll see they are connected and they're up to date. In other words, they have synced. There's nothing outstanding at the moment there. You can pause them as well. You can edit the details for the device. It's obviously got a device ID, so I'm going to blank out the device ID here, because if you've got that device ID, well, yeah, you can share with me, I suppose. I mean, it's up to me to receive it or not, but I'm just saying that that is where you'd find the device ID. And then the various sharing apps again are the folders. You can set the password, your encryption password here as well if you want to. And there's some folders here that I haven't shared to the phone. Okay, these are the ones that are shared with the phone. So that one is my main photos folder on the phone. That is the Face app itself. It stores its stuff in a different folder outside of where all the camera and the screenshots are saved. And then my sound recordings folder is also on a separate folder. So those are shared with my desktop computer. These are not. Oh, I can just show where advanced looks like. So yeah, you could hard code the addresses here if you wanted to put IP addresses and things in. I just left it as dynamic, and you can also compress data in transit if you want to. You can set any network limits if you wanted to, otherwise you just leave it as is. And you can also mark a device as untrusted. In other words, it must be protected by a password as well. That might be if you're working with some other remote machines or friends or, you know, something like that. And the folder setups, again, it's basically just confirming here that everything is up to date. So this is the photos one, which I'm storing off to my server, and this is in one direction only. So if I edit this folder, this shared folder at the moment, it's on my desktop computer, and you can see there it is, it's desktop. It's just the name of the folder, it's got a folder ID, that's the path on my local machine. That's the machine that I'm sharing to at the moment, the server over there. Again, you know, whether it's passworded, protected or not. This particular folder, 2023 photos, is from my big year's worth of photos that's stored on my desktops. I'm not storing that to the phone. I am only backing that up to the server. Versioning, I've got simple file versioning in at the moment, but there's a couple of other options, staggered, external, which is managed by an external application if that's present, or trash can file versioning. The website does explain the difference, but I found that the simple file versioning is perfectly fine for me to use. You've got to auto clean out if you wanted to for the versioning. So you could just keep the last 30 days or whatever the case is. Or you can set it also for how many versions to keep of changes. I've just set mine for just keep 2 version changes. You can also saw a separate place for the versions path if you're not making use of this here, the .st versions directory. That's the default under the Syncthing folder. And then there's also a cleanup interval as well you can set there. You can set some ignore patterns as well. And then this is some advanced settings here for when to rescan. You know, this one you'll see here, I've set it as a send only. So often you might have a send and receive. You sync, in other words, whatever you change on either side will sync to the other, syncs for that folder. Or you can make it a receive only, just depending on which side you set it up as well. I tend to set it up on the side I'm pushing from. File pull order, that's if you needed to have an order set for it. You can set a minimum disk space as well, so you don't fill up the remote machine completely, whether you also want to sync ownership of every file or send ownership of file, ignoring of permissions. You know, most of us you can leave as default. I'd only really go and fiddle with these things if you wanted to, you know, enhance something and do something extra. And there's quite a lot of help as well. There's a lot of information as well given inside the application to assist you. So, you know, you don't really get very lost with this. So the one thing I wanted to show was Obsidian Notes. So obviously the Obsidian Notes, I'm using this intensively every day, basically, and I'm making changes all the time. So what this will show really is just confirmation of what the last change was, which is the last file that was changed. And then just before we go look at the file server one, the Docker container. I can just quickly show you here. This is again on the desktop, the browser for the desktop machine. If I go to settings here, you can obviously set the name of this device, and that's how it'll appear for the other devices, if it's going to be shared with or to. You can set for on this machine how much minimum disk space you want. The API key is something over here that you could use if you're making use of the API. You could also report anonymous usage if you wanted to back to the project, which is handy for them just to know, how many places it's been installed and what's and that sort of thing. I suppose I can actually activate that. Default configuration. On the GUI side, this, as I recall, is the web GUI for it to connect to this interface. And I have set up a login name and password as well. And then under connections, you've got a couple of, this was actually all just default, so I've pretty well much just left everything here as it is. You can ignore devices as well if there's something that keeps trying to bug you and connect to you, I suppose, there. And I haven't ignored any folders. So that's really just the basic setup. Take me back. Let me just save that. That's that setup, really. Let's just look at the server version. So this is the one that's running on my Docker container on the Open Media Vault machine. And on this machine, I've just got the photos coming from my desktop, and it's syncing the Obsidian notes across all my devices. All my devices are syncing to it, should I say. And it also confirms here what it's shared with. Donnie's Android tablet, phone, desktop, and iPad mini. When was the last scan? Latest changes that were made. It's a simple file versioning for 30 days. And it just gives you a couple of other stats there. But I think what's of interest was, if you want to sort of back things up here, this is where the versions are as well. You can see, I click on versions. Everything that's in the Obsidian Notes folder, including its own subfolders, which are its setting files and various other things. You can wind everything back if you need to. But say, for example, the Arch Linux Manjaro tips. I work with this file quite regularly, actually. So obviously it's set at the moment to do not restore. You can filter here by date if you want to, go back just last 7 days or just to yesterday's or so, but let's leave it as it is at the moment. If I go to Arch Linux Manjaro tips and you click down here where it says do not restore, it actually gives you the dates and the times of when the last changes were synced. So I could go back here to that 23rd over there and just click on that and then say restore. And what it's going to do is it'll pull it out of its little subfolder where it's saving all these versions, and it'll overwrite the file that's in the main folder. And obviously that will then resync to all the other devices that are syncing with it, and you'll have this wound back. So like I said, it's not a fancy proper backup. People caution and say, don't even use this for backup. Well, I'm just saying you can if you've really got nothing else. It's one way of backing up with some basic version control as well. Just again, think very carefully about what you're syncing to where. Are you syncing bidirectional, that sort of thing? And maybe just test out what your scenarios may be, just to be very sure that it is working properly. But this thing has really been working trouble-free for me. I've had absolutely no problem with Syncthing. It's been running just beautifully in the background. You'll see at the moment there, it's also just confirming on the server side, because this is connecting, has got a couple of different devices connecting to it. You'll see it just shows there that the iPad mini is disconnected, inactive at the moment, and the same with the Android tablet. I leave them off during the day. Phone is connected and up to date, and so is the desktop. So it really just confirms that. And then, yeah, really just one other thing I want to show. At the bottom here are some links. Obviously, we've already looked at the homepage. There is a documentation site, tons of very good documentation. There's also the support forums, change logs for the application, and the GitHub source code itself. And then the one other thing maybe of interest really is the statistics here. So these are sort of global statistics, and you can, by just going to this address at the top here, data.syncthing.net, anybody can just go and have a look at these stats. But this is where the reporting comes in. You see by version, most people obviously still using I think that's 1.3. I can't see. Sorry, it's 1.4 5 possibly. Okay, not everybody's updated yet, but there's how many versions of it are running. Data transfers by day. Remember, it's not going through their server. It's just the anonymous reporting, which will just give things like traffic stats and a couple of other basics, really. The amount of data transferred, and I mean, it's 71 petabytes. And also the breakdown of renaming, resuming transfers, etc., where it's actually in use in the world. So yes, very well used in Europe, followed probably by the USA and elsewhere in the world. And they've got a breakdown of more sort of interesting statistics here if you're really into reading the details, including what platforms it's running on and so on and so forth. Quite a lot of detail. Love stats. Feature usage. Feature group usage. It's just one thing that I wanted to go back and check quickly was I mentioned the ignore patterns. Oh, I don't think I've got ignore patterns set. I think it was set inside Obsidian Notes. So inside Obsidian Notes, I've just set Obsidian Notes to ignore the Syncthing folder. Don't open those files. Otherwise, what's going to happen is you're going to see double versions. So if that does happen to you, just have a look at that folder. This is my Obsidian Notes folder in my home directory. You can see over there. Underneath it, you'll see there is a little subdirectory called Sync, and that is where the Syncthing information is. These are all my notes in my root folder, my markdown files. And if I open up the Sync folder, it's got the same name as Obsidian Notes because that is the folder that it's syncing here. This will be for each folder that you sync. It's got attachments, books, media, and CETA. This is the folders that are in my Obsidian Notes folder as it is. So this is what it would be restoring. These are the versions that it's storing as backups at the moment. So manually you could go look for it as well if you wanted to. But that's actually where that is. What I can maybe just show you quickly is in my Obsidian Notes, I can maybe just show where I set it to ignore the sync folder. Because otherwise your problem is going to be, like I said, you're going to see duplicate notes. So if I open up my Obsidian Notes over here and I just go to Setup, and if I click there on Files and Links in Obsidian, you'll see there's excluded files. And all I've done is I have set to it exclude sync / that, just so that it doesn't pick up those notes as, editable notes, because those are, remember, backup notes that are in a subfolder. So yeah, that's really it. So yes, quite a interesting application, very slick, very well written, and it operates rock solid. If it's something that you need to do, syncing files and folders between phones and tablets, or between PCs, or even backing up across the internet to a friend, for example, this is probably an app that you do want to have a look at then. And I think you might find it actually very useful. And just to remind you again, look, I'm not making videos every day or every second or third day or even necessarily every week or so. It's only when I've got something really interesting I want to talk about. So I would encourage you otherwise to just subscribe if you don't want to miss any of the videos. Most of my traffic, actually, if it comes to my YouTube channel, is actually searches for looking for past things that I've done. So my content isn't necessarily today news content, but it's reference material, and I use my own videos to remind me later on, what I did. I move between a lot of things, so I often have to go and refresh myself on how did I set Nextcloud up, or how was I using some other application that I talked about, 2 or 3 years ago. So it's also something that helps me a bit, and I hope it helps you as well. But anyway, thanks for watching and stay safe out there, and I'll see you in my next video.